Welcome back. Convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on Saturday in connection with what law enforcement officials said is federal sex trafficking allegations. According to 3 law enforcement officials, the arrest, which was part of a joint NYPD and FBI investigation, stems from incidents spanning from the years 2002 to 2005. Officials said the 66-year-old Epstein had flown from Paris to New York when he was arrested in Teterboro, New Jersey. A source familiar with the investigation says the Epstein case was led by the Southern District of New York's Public Corruption Unit, working with the Sex Crimes Division. The NYPD, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, and the FBI declined to comment. Epstein is expected to appear before a federal magistrate judge in New York today to face charges that include sex trafficking of minors, for which there is no federal statute of limitations. Separately, a federal judge ruled in February that prosecutors led now by Secretary of Labor Alex Acosta violated the rights of Epstein's alleged victims after 2 of them sued the government for not telling them about a non-prosecution deal until it had been finalized. In 2008, Epstein dodged major jail time after pleading guilty to state charges of soliciting and procuring a person under 18 for prostitution. In an agreement with federal authorities, he served a 13-month jail sentence, but listen to this, was allowed to spend much of it at his office through a work release program. Under those federal charges, Epstein could have faced life in prison. The deal ended the FBI's investigation into numerous accusations against Epstein and granted immunity from the more serious federal charges. But according to the New York Times, February's ruling opened the possibility of nullifying the agreement and allowing Epstein to be prosecuted on the original federal charges. At the same time, the Justice Department opened its own investigation into the plea deal and whether its attorneys committed professional misconduct in resolving the case in 2008. Yes, they did.
Jonathan Lemire, tell me exactly what happened. What do you know about the Southern District of New York moving on an old friend of Donald Trump's and the Justice Department allowing an investigation to move forward that obviously is going to cause discomfort not only to Donald Trump, but also possibly to Bill Clinton and others who have been Jeffrey Epstein's friend for some time. Donald Trump calling Epstein in a past interview a terrific guy who liked young girls. Any reporting on that, how it moved forward? Was Donald Trump aware that it was moving forward, and did he give the go-ahead?
Well, our next guest certainly is the definitive expert on this issue, but certainly I can speak to the White House's perspective on this. President Trump yesterday had spent the weekend at his golf club in New Jersey. He was asked about it as he was boarding Air Force One to come back to Washington, whether he knew about the arrest. He claimed he didn't, which seems sort of dubious considering how he weighed in on cable news coverage all weekend long, and certainly the Epstein matter was covered extensively on all the networks. So I think that we from our reporting, we know that he certainly was briefed that what was happening. You are right. He has ties, deep, long-standing ties to Epstein. He's quoted in, I believe, a 2002 New York Magazine profile about Epstein, saying he was a great guy, and even went on to say, perhaps in a jocular way, that Epstein enjoyed young women, which of course it carries a very different meaning now, perhaps. We also know that Epstein knew President Clinton, and the flight records show that Clinton traveled on Epstein's plane more than a dozen times over the years. There is a sense of concern around the White House as to where this could go. The president, of course, is telling people near him that he doesn't know much about this. It's unclear how personally involved he was with the decision to make this arrest yesterday or over the weekend in New Jersey. But it's something that people are watching nervously here. This has been a shadow that's followed Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. It sort of hovered around the 2016 campaign. Reporters were sort of digging around the edges of it as that was going on, and I think there is concern about what could happen next.
Well, joining us now is the investigative reporter who has been covering the Epstein case for the Miami Herald the whole time, Julie Brown. Great to have you back on the show, Julie.
Thanks for having me.
Give us a sense of what the charges are against him now now that I guess the runway has been cleared to charge him again. And what more is expected, or are you looking at, given the fact that you have great knowledge of all the different tentacles surrounding this case?
Well, I think what we want to look at is what kind of evidence that they have, especially what kind of new evidence that they have. It's probably likely that they have some kind of new evidence out of New York, because the charges out of Florida, the Justice Department has already ruled that they're not going to re-prosecute him on those charges. So they probably have some new information. Among the new evidence could be witnesses or people that worked with him who now want to talk to authorities. You know, a lot of time has gone by. Some of these people might be thinking differently about their role in this operation that he was running. So we'll have to wait and see what kind of witnesses or possibly employees that worked for him might be providing to authorities.
Julie, one of the reasons that Jeffrey Epstein is going to be in federal court here in Lower Manhattan today is the work that you and the Miami Herald did over a long period of time on the initial charges lodged against him in Florida. You were speaking just now of witnesses. There were more than 80, I think, 80 young women who you spoke to in your initial reporting. It's a shocking number. Talk about the degree of difficulty in getting these young women, many of them quite young, to participate in unveiling, revealing the depth of this depravity.
Well, that was probably the hardest part. I mean, these these women now had felt betrayed, not only by, traumatized by Epstein, by his lawyers, by the private investigators that stalked them, but there were prosecutors that they believed would put him behind bars, really give him the sentence that he deserved, and they feel that to some degree they betrayed them. So they certainly were not ready to start talking to me or anybody. And keep in mind, since this was so long ago, a lot of them have moved on with their lives. They have married, they have children, and some of them never told their families that this ever happened. So that was a big challenge. I think that in time also, though, because some of them have children, especially if they had girls, they felt, I know Virginia, for example, Virginia Roberts, felt that a duty at some point to speak out because she didn't want this to happen to other girls.
Hey, so Julie, let me ask you about some of the big names that you and others have said might be revealed during this investigation. Obviously, you wrote a story talking about Alan Dershowitz and his battle with David Boies. He continues to be accused, and it's very interesting. He said, hey, I'll go ahead, file a defamation suit against me for calling you a liar, and then he had it. Now he's trying to get that dropped. But it's very interesting. You not only have Alan Dershowitz in the middle of this, in the charges. Obviously, Bill Clinton's name keeps coming up because the number of times that he flew with Epstein, Donald Trump involved in this. Are there any other names, political or otherwise, that you know of that we'll be hearing about?
There probably will be. You know, he contributed to a number of political campaigns. Some of those people returned the money. There were a lot of also Harvard professors, scientists, academics that were in his circle. But because they flew on his plane, quite frankly, or moved in his social circles, doesn't necessarily mean that they were involved in anything illegal. So I think that we have to wait and see how deep this goes as far as this sex trafficking operation goes. But there are certainly many people right now who are probably a little nervous that he's been arrested.
So let me ask you, those flight manifests, do they not only reveal the passengers, but do they reveal any of those high-profile named people actually going to his island?
Yes. Of course. I mean, we know that Bill Clinton was going to, on his plane. We know that there were...
Bill Clinton was going to his plane to the island?
You know, I don't. Yes, we know he was on the island. If he wasn't on the island directly from Epstein's plane, there were other ways to get to the island. You know, there's ferries to the island. There's other ways to go there. And we know that some of these people got there by other means, not just by Mr. Epstein's plane.
Okay.
It's incredible. So many victims, and it took so long for this man to be held to justice, and I really am so impressed by your tenacity pursuing justice for these victims. I'm also disgusted that a sitting member of the Trump cabinet was complicit in this. What should happen with Secretary Acosta? Should Congress hold him to account for his role striking this incredible sweetheart deal that kept a predator out of prison and instead allowed him to leave for 12 hours of the day over a year-long period instead of actually facing repercussions?
Well, Congress, as you know, has asked the Justice Department to look at this case, but from what I understand, the Office of Professional Responsibility that is overseeing this has no jurisdiction over Acosta because he no longer works for the Justice Department. So it remains to be seen whether they're going to do anything about his role in this. But what I will say is, in all the explanations that I've heard from Mr. Acosta and from some of his assistant prosecutors who handled this, they have never explained why they kept this deal secret. If it was such a good deal, like they say, this was fair, this was, you know, the best we could do given that these were young girls, they didn't want to be intimidated any longer, they were afraid to talk. If it was such a good deal, then why did they seal it? Why did they fight these victims for almost a year to make sure that nobody found out about it if it was such a good deal?
Yeah, those are the key questions. I mean, it looks like a massive cover-up, obviously, and those are the questions we hope get answered as well. I wonder what else, Julie, happens on that island. Like, what other activities are there? These guys who are going there, I mean, you can't implicate them because they were on a plane, but gosh, it sure doesn't look good.
No, and you know, Virginia Roberts, one of the victims who's been the most vocal, she has described really that there was a lot of sexual activities. There was really horrific things that happened on that island, according to her. And she's been, quite frankly, that's another issue with these victims. She has been really beat up. Mr. Dershowitz is among those who beats her up on a regular basis. So when you're beat up like that, you stop. I mean, she hasn't named any names because she's afraid. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Julie Brown, thank you very much. We really appreciate your reporting. We'll have much more on this story in our next hour, and please come back anytime. Coming up this hour, President Trump is warning that Iran better be careful as Tehran vows to boost its uranium enrichment in defiance of the 2015 nuclear accord. We'll talk to Senator and member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Chris Coons, about that. And Richard Haass will also join the conversation. Morning Joe is back in a moment.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.